Okay, it's taboo to talk about sex, but in our homes, it's like one of the most important things that we probably should be talking about, or at least actualizing. So Dr. John Delony, I want to put you on the spot and say, what are your 3 or 4 golden rules for a good sex life? And today's video is sponsored by Seed. If you're worried about your gut microbiome, you're trying to make some changes, but ultimately, if you're trying to add carbohydrates back into your diet after doing low carb for a long time, very important you take care of your microbiome. So that link down below saves you 25% off of Seed's Daily Synbiotic, which has a prebiotic and a probiotic in one capsule. So a capsule inside of a capsule. Super interesting technology. Very, very cool to check out. So they also fund a lot of microbiome research. So they put their money where their mouth is. A lot of the proceeds go back into research because we're trying to understand what these little microbes in our gut do and how important they are. So anyhow, that makes a big difference, made a big difference for me. I don't usually recommend probiotics because a lot of them are garbage, but this one's definitely worth a shot. So that link down below is in the top line of the description for Seed.
Great question. I'd say number 1, be honest. We don't talk about what we're into. We don't talk about what makes us uncomfortable. We don't talk about past experiences that we're bringing into the future, right, or into the present. We don't talk about past hurts. We just avoid, and we avoid, and we avoid. So there's something about being honest about the conversation about sex. So I was with a group of folks, and I was working out these conversation cards about sex that you could just ask your partner to put on the table for discussion topics. And the number of people who were married with kids that were saying, I would never ask that. Are you crazy? And I thought, you made humans together. Like, what do you mean? You can't ask that question, right? And so it doesn't even matter what the question is. The idea that there's this line that I can't cross when it comes to, hey, what do you think about, have you ever been, dude, one time this happened to me. We just shut all that off. And secrets kill relationships. And so your partner will bounce up against this imaginary line and they can't figure out what it is and they don't know why you won't go here or they don't know why you won't have this conversation. And like most of us, we either blame, they don't like me, they don't think I'm attractive, they create stories, or worse, I look in the mirror and say something's wrong with me. I'm gonna try to fix me. And so much of this could be solved by being honest. And so the couples who find talking about intimacy, find talking about sex, find talking about, hey, have you heard about this? Oh, that's crazy. Really? Those are the couples that win. Number 2, be curious, not judgmental. When somebody has the courage to be honest, and you immediately go, that's gross, or that's for weirdos, or that's sick.
Bring it on.
They just, well, in the DeLauer house, that shuts somebody down. And sexuality is so vulnerable. That's such this deep, dark, like thing that's so personal and private. To share that is super vulnerable. And if you respond with some sort of judgment instead of, I've never even thought of that, tell me more about that. Or, you want to try what? Tell me about that. I don't even know how that's physically possible. Like, why would you, like, right? That is an invitation. And that is taking somebody's vulnerability.
We're gonna go to prison.
Well, in the DeLauer house, right? I'm just kidding. But like, it's I love you. I love all of you. And I'm leaning in this way with curiosity, with a question. I don't know how that works. Where did you hear that, right? The third thing is, I think the data is coming in pretty clear. Removing pornography out of a relationship, removing outside influences, and forcing a couple to sit with each other and say, who are you and what do you need? Or what do you want to experiment with? What do you want to try? Instead of outsourcing our intimacy and our curiosity and our questions somewhere else. A non-pornographic analogy for this is I remember taking my wife to see the movie La La Land, right? it's this rad movie with two beautiful Hollywood stars in Los Angeles, and it's in all these smoky, cool jazz clubs. The movie's beautiful. The ending was perfect. I loved the movie. But I remember walking out of the movie holding my wife's hand, and I thought, I just paid 2 Hollywood actors to dance all night in jazz clubs. Why didn't I just take her dancing? Because I'm embarrassed, because I'm a terrible dancer. The one jazz club in Nashville is downtown. So I ended up outsourcing that experience, and my wife and I just sat there and absorbed other people's relationship arc, other people's weirdness, stepping on each other's toes, figuring it all out. And that was the magic that I outsourced. And so similarly, we go looking for other sparks and other things. It's easier to go, well, look what they're doing on the screen, instead of looking at your partner and saying, I kind of want to try this. Or, hey, I heard instead of saying, what if we, because one of those is like, hey man, it's just on the screen. One of them is me being vulnerable. And so I would say remove as many outside influences as possible. And let me give you a fourth one. Sex and intimacy almost never begins in a sexual interaction. There's a context to intimacy. There's a context to sexuality. I like the way Dr. Emily Nagoski says, it's not a sex drive. There's no such thing as that. It's a series of gas pedals and brakes. And so what we're trying to do is, how can I take my foot off all the brakes in the house and make a house full of gas pedals? And how can I create a world where my wife isn't having to slam on the brakes all the time? So in my house, I remember feeling less than, because before anything happened, before any bedroom door closed, the kitchen had to be clean. And over time, I got to feel like she would rather be doing the dishes than be with this, right? And I started getting resentful, and I started getting frustrated. And one day I brought it up, like, hey man, I don't understand the dishes thing, man. There's no room for spontaneity. There's no room for the kids are finally in bed. And come to find out, she had a picture of what she thought I expected of her. She was this fancy research professor, and now she was staying at home. And so in her head, the voices keep going about, I'm not enough, and I'm not doing well, and I'm not, unless this is done. And so in her mind, she was trying to create a context for me. And in my mind, I didn't know that. And so I tell you what, man, I love doing the dishes now, right? I have no problem when we're wrestling kids and homework and knocking the dishes out, because I know that that's something that weighs on her, right? And so it's having those types of conversations outside of, hey, let's do this physical act, or are we gonna do this, we're gonna do this. Man, that's not where the conversation starts. Conversation starts in the morning with, hey, how can I love you today? And if I think of her during the day, sometimes texting if I have to, but man, if I can call and just say, hey, I'm running from interview to interview, and I said this thing about our marriage, and I just wanted to let you know I'm so glad that you picked me. It's so awesome. Dude, that is the track to intimacy down the road, right? That gives her permission at 4 o'clock to say, hey, I'm just telling you now, I'm so tired today. Awesome. I'm taken care of, fill in the blank, right? So we often think sex starts in the moment when the music cues up, and it doesn't, man. It starts sometimes days before, sometimes minutes before, sometimes hours before. So on the spot, those would be my 4 golden rules for
I love that last one.
Great sex.
My wife and I have this thing where we will say, we kind of give each other what percent we're at, our battery, right? Mm-hmm. If I come home and I'm down to I'm like, babe, I'm at a 60%. She's like, that's cool. I got extra. I'll pick it up. Yeah. If she does the same, I'm at a 30. It's cool. I've got energy. Mm-hmm. If we both come back and we're both at a 30, hey, I'm going to give you slack. I'm going to give you slack. Mm-hmm. Dishes aren't going to get done today. Yep. We're going to give the kids a melatonin gummy and put them down to sleep.
Just call it, yeah.
And and that does trickle over to intimacy as well. And before we wrap this up, I know a lot of people watching are probably also thinking about, okay, what about initiation? What my wife doesn't want to have sex with me. There's probably a lot of answers to that depending on situations. But if you look at like a typical family dynamic, let's just say, okay, I've married with kids. Wife doesn't want to have sex with me anymore. What are some things that guys can do that might maybe, not solve the problem, but as sort of fixers, guys always kind of look at this and be like, I want to fix it. What am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? Or let me push harder or initiate harder, and it doesn't always work, right?
It never works. Yeah.
Well, what is a potential strategy there?
Man, this is a super unpopular opinion, but I think most men are so insecure with themselves outside of their utility. What task do you need me to do for you? What question do you need me to answer for you? And we have no psychology for presence, a warm, safe presence. And so when I'm going around trying to fix and do, sex becomes a chore. It becomes another little box on the calendar of things that my wife has to check off. Got to get the kids in bed, got to get the lunches made, got to do this, got to make sure my husband fill in the blank. When I walk in my front door and recognize my wife is smarter than I'll ever be, and I got to do interviews all day, and I got to write a book and read nerd articles, and she was in the car 4 hours driving kids back and forth. Like, dude, I'm gonna walk in the door and be as calm and whole as I possibly can, so that her whole body goes whoosh. And then I become not a chore, but I become a safe place to, the only word I can think of in the moment is abide. It's almost a religious word, but she can rest here, right? The second thing is guys are notoriously bad for creating a thing in their head and not being clear and expecting their partner to read their mind and then getting mad when they don't read their mind, right? And so, but I thought you were going to dress up and I thought we were going to play this music, and she's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And so I think there's something about being super clear, which Hollywood would tell you makes it less sexy. Any marriage counselor or sex therapist will say, no, clear is kind. Clarity is incredible, because then you both get what you need. Even if clarity is, I need you to be super spontaneous, right? That would fill me up. And I created this thing. I didn't create anything. I just like to say that because it's so silly. But my challenge for couples is go get 2 like white mailing envelopes that you would get at like Walgreens for 5 cents, right? And you put 10 things in that envelope, and she put 10 things in that envelope, and let's come up with a number of times a week or every 2 weeks or a month, whatever the rhythm is for your house, and you agree we're going to alternate, and I'll pull one out on yours, and we'll at least be curious about it. Like, we'll both be game to like, all right, the envelope said, right, we'll try this thing. Sometimes it's hard to sit down at a table and be like, all right, so I've been thinking, I'd like to try. Like, that's awkward, man. Most of us don't have the tools to do that.
Go get the spreadsheet.
Yeah. Nothing says, let's be romantic, like, let's go get the spreadsheet, right? But if you pull this out and it's my turn to draw, and my wife says, holding hands and French kissing for 25 minutes like we used to when we first started dating. And I'm gonna go, that's not what I had in mind. Why is French kissing why is that a thing for you? And she'll explain it and talk to it like it made me feel like back when you loved, like, awesome, man. Like, and was I hoping for gymnastics? Yes. But dude, the goal over time is for us to come together in this way, right? And she may pull one out and be like, what? I don't know how that's physically possible. That's a curiosity. Like, tell me about this. She just invited me to have this conversation we haven't had, right? And so there may be occasionally like, dude, that's not gonna work. Let's try another one. But at least we're having a conversation. At least we are leaning on these little things, these little tools, right? And if you find your body react to something your partner brings up, if my wife says, tonight, sex for us is holding hands and French kissing, that's it. And I find myself getting mad, getting angry. And I've sat with men that's their response. That's your work to do, brother. That's on you. Because your wife is being open and clear about what would give her peace, what would bring intimacy into your home and into your bed, and you have a problem with it. That is yours to deal with, not hers. And if you come up and you remember something, or your buddies are talking about something and you want to try it, and she's like, I'm uncomfortable with that, and you get mad, that's your work to do, right? Because y'all are coming together on this deal. And so that's just an easy, like a fun, silly way. It's no cost, right? Everyone has 2 envelopes laying around their house, and everyone has sheets of paper they can tear off and put in the envelope. The challenge with intimacy, especially when you start having kids and you're running around, you're both working full time, is it sounds not romantic to put it on the calendar. And it's one of those old Dr. Phil sayings like, okay, do you want to put it on the calendar and have sex, or do you want to not put it on the calendar and not have sex? You get to pick, right? Well, then let's put it on the calendar. Same with working out, same with eating right, same with work. I mean, things that are important to you, you prioritize and you write it down and put it on the calendar. Let's just prioritize putting that on the calendar. And that means you have to talk about it, and you have to start planning for it and thinking about it. And then if you know Wednesday night has a star by it on the calendar, you start thinking about it in the morning. You might start that morning and be like, I got so much to do today. It's kind of but over the rest of the day, you're gonna be thinking about it. And all right, it says tonight, it might impact what you eat. It might impact how much you participate in a work meeting. It might impact what you listen to on the way home. But you're starting to get the engine going, man. And then you come home and you're a calm presence, and man, that changes everything.
Yeah, and don't be, afraid to initiate it too, right? It's like sometimes there's a little bit of that. I think, oh, my wife's stressed out. Like I don't want to pressure her, and like a gentle initiation of it. I know, TMI, but in my house, it's like sometimes my wife's stressed out, but all she wants is for me to feel safe, and then all of a sudden it's just like. Okay, and it's, I think people forget how important the intimacy is in a relationship when your relationship starts becoming a business.
Yes.
You have kids, you have family, you have work, you have appointments. Suddenly your relationship is a business and less of a relationship. And being able to carve that time out, if your relationship is a business, then being able to put that on the calendar, then so be it.
Yeah.
That's the way it is to maybe break that cycle for you.
Well, and sometimes the best thing you can do for your workout program is take a day off. Take 2 days off, right? Sometimes the greatest thing you can do for your body fat percentage and your strength gains is rest. And then sometimes the best thing you can do is to be really tired and go anyway, right? And that's our job, is to figure out our bodies and learn when the signals are real and when they're just flashing we can go right through that sign, right? Intimacy works very much the same. Sometimes it's, will you please just walk in this house and show me that you desire me, please? And then other times it's, will you please talk to me first, right? Yeah. It's both and. And so if I find myself frustrated or pissed off, that's on me. I can't make her not frustrated or not upset. I got to deal with me. And so I'm going to go back to clear is kind, to compassion. If I find myself mad, we're going to talk about it offline, because this is never the time to have that fight. But if you think of your sex and intimacy life not as a sex drive, but as a series of gas pedals and brakes, man. As Dr. Nagotsky says, if you think of it as, how can I make all of my house gas pedals? That's going to change the way I come in the house. That's going to change the way I help with bedtimes. That's going to change the way, when my daughter is just a human hurricane, I take her out and we jump on the trampoline. Even though I had stuff I need to do, well, I'm going to do that stuff later. Because my job is to make sure the house feels this way. Yeah. And often, not always, but often, sex takes care of itself. Let me add one fifth one real quick.
Yeah.
When you say I do, when you commit, you're also making a commitment to be about healing. And so that means you have to deal with old traumas. I think that's part of your work. And it's cruel to starve your partner, to starve your husband, to starve your wife, because you haven't dealt with hard stuff. It's cruel for them to hold you accountable when your body is screaming at you, right? And those things are challenging and difficult and hard. But you're worth going to see a trauma counselor And you're worth teaching your body that you weren't safe then, but you're safe now. And you're worth joining a group. You're worth having intimacy in your life moving forward. And so your work is, I'm going to go do the hard stuff and go heal from some of those things. I'm not going to bring that with me into my new relationships. I'm not going to bring that into this new family tree that we're building. The great Terry Real says trauma rolls down a hill through a family like a forest fire until one person turns and faces it and says, just stops with me. You get burned when you do that. You get scarred when you do that. But he says, you give peace to generations you may never meet, right? And so when I said I do, I had to deal with some hard stuff, right? Because my body reacts in certain ways. My body is awkward with intimacy sometimes. My body eye contact was hard for me. Things I had to deal with. And that was on me. That was for me to deal with. That wasn't for me to blame my wife, right? For all of our marriage. And so if you say you're in, then you got to go do the work, whatever that looks like. And that's hard.
Heck yeah, man. Well, Doc, where can everyone find you, man?
You can follow me at John Delony on the interwebs, or you can go to johndelony.com and you can pick up the book anywhere. And you can watch the Dr. John Delony show or listen to the podcast.
Right on, man.
Thanks,
Thank you,
brother.
brother.
Appreciate you.